The WWE Championship. No matter what form the belt takes, it is the de facto biggest prize in professional wrestling, apologies to the Universal title, with a lineage that stretches back to 1963. 51 different men have held the title, some icons of the sport, some forgettable or surprising choices, but all cemented in wrestling history. No two reigns are ever the same, and some wins had far greater ramifications than others, but which were the most important? I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic.com, and these are the 10 most historic WWE title changes. Join us! Number 10, CM Punk vs John Cena, Money in the Bank 2011. For a second in 2011, it seemed that everything we knew about professional wrestling was null and void. CM Punk, that rascally straight-edge bag of misery, sat legs crossed at the top of the Monday Night Raw ramp and dropped the now infamous pipe bomb, breaking the 4th, 5th, and 6th wall and igniting a level of genuine excitement and intrigue in the WWE that had been missing since the Attitude Era ended. Punk had set his sights on John Cena and his WWE title in a feud based around pride, frustration, and an overwhelming us versus them mentality. The match was set for Money in the Bank, which was taking place in the Second City Savior's hometown, Chicago, Illinois. Reality was further blurred when it emerged that Punk's contract expired after Money in the Bank. There was no way he was winning though, was there? Greeted by an intensely partisan home crowd, Punk and Cena put on a stellar bout, the first WWE match since 1997 to be awarded 5 stars by Dave Meltzer. Shenanigans ensued, John Laurinaitis took a bop to the jaw, and the unthinkable happened. Punk won, and he left with the WWE title in tow. The image of him blowing Vince a kiss as he buggered off through the crowd with the title has gone down in history, and we'll never forget how excited we all felt about how unpredictable the sport felt for the first time in ages. Until Triple H and Kevin Nash ruined it, obviously. Number 9, Ultimate Warrior vs Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania 6. In 1990, the wrestling boom was still alive and well, but was starting to lose a little steam. Hogan had been on top for 6 years, and his big boot, leg drop, rinse-repeat formula was starting to become a bit stale. McMahon put the title on Randy Savage for over a year between Mania 4 and 5, but even then it was still the Hogan show. Fans were starting to get itchy and wanted someone new and different to root for. Step forward, the Ultimate Warrior. The face paint-clad rambling lunatic was picking up tons of momentum, and his time as Intercontinental Champion was used as a grooming period to prepare the Warrior for a run with the Winged Eagle. Warrior and Hogan were on a collision course, and the ultimate challenge was set for WrestleMania 6. In an unusual turn of events, the decision was made to go face versus face for the main event, and in an unprecedented move, both Hogan's WWF title and Warrior's Intercontinental title were on the line, a first ever for the Fed. The match itself is surprisingly good given both wrestlers' limitations from an in-ring perspective. Their story was simple, and the 67,000 plus packed into Toronto's Skydome were rabid and lapped up every moment. Warrior eventually reigned supreme, pinning Hogan after the Warrior Splash. Hogan had passed the torch, making sure that all eyes were on him as he did it, as Warrior became the first dual singles champion in WWF history. Number 8, Kofi Kingston vs Daniel Bryan, WrestleMania 35. Despite the predetermined nature of wrestling, fans still put a lot of stock in the championship and want to see their favourites win the big one, as well as those who have put in years of hard work and made a multitude of sacrifices for our entertainment. Leading up to WrestleMania 35, a mixture of fan power, momentum, and fortunate circumstance saw Kofi Kingston thrust into the title scene for the first time in his career, taking on the planet's champion, Daniel Bryan. Bryan had been in Kofi's spot leading up to WrestleMania 30, written off by the powers that be as a good hand, but not quite WWE champion material. 5 years on, and the roles were reversed, with Bryan in the position of power telling Kingston that he just wasn't good enough. In one of the most anticipated title matches in recent history, Kingston beat Bryan, dropping the GOAT with a Trouble in Paradise before lifting the gold. In winning the belt at WrestleMania, Kofi was not only rewarded for his 11 years of service to WWE, but became the first African-born WWE champion in history, a historic moment that moved Xavier Woods to tears in the middle of the ring, never mind fans and old pros around the world. Representation should never be undervalued. Look at how Black Panther performed in cinemas, giving young black kids all over the world a hero they could point to and say, they're like me. To those young kids, Kofi is wrestling's Black Panther, a man at the top of the biggest promotion in the world, black and proud, and an example that no matter your background or the colour of your skin, you can rise to the very top. Number 7. Chris Jericho, Undisputed Champion. As the bungled invasion was drawing to a close, the WWF was faced with a problem it never had before. Not only did it now have more wrestlers than your dad's had hot dinners, but it also had more title belts than it knew what to do with. For the first time, we were presented with 2 world title scenes running parallel to each other, the WWF Championship and the WCW Championship, both under one roof. Something had to give. Kayfabe company owner Ric Flair announced that WWF champion Steve Austin would take on WCW champion The Rock in a title unification match at the upcoming Vengeance pay-per-view. Vince McMahon interjected and made it a one-night, 4-man mini-tournament with Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle added to the mix. Austin defeated Angle, retaining the WWF Championship, and Jericho defeated The Rock for the WCW Championship, setting up the unification match for the main event. As was par for the course in the Attitude Era, there were run-ins, shenanigans, ref bumps, and foreign objects aplenty, and thanks to Booker T attacking Stone Cold, Jericho crawled over for the 1-2-3 and became the first undisputed WWF champion. Considering who Y2J beat on his way to the title, this was a massive feat and solidified the Ayatollah of Rock and Roller as a true main eventer. Number 6. Ric Flair wins the 1992 Royal Rumble. It's mad to think that at one point the Royal Rumble was just a match without any great significance or ramifications. Hulk Hogan used to win it just for fun while holding the WWF title, Big John Studd won it, even Hacksaw Jim Duggan won it, which says it all really. Ho! I'm just kidding, Jim, calm down. 1992 changed all that. Ric Flair turned up in the WWF with the real world's title, using every opportunity to tell Hogan how he was nothing compared to the all-conquering Nature Boy. Hogan, in the meantime, was swapping the WWF title back and forth with The Undertaker, with the hot-shotting becoming such a mess that President Jack Tunney said, "Sod this, no one's champion. Win the Royal Rumble and you win the belt." For the first time, we had a Rumble with stakes and a stack of viable competitors who could win the thing outright. Hogan, Flair, Taker, Piper, Savage, Jake, Sid, the list goes on. Eventually, it was Nate who stood tall, lasting over an hour and taking home the grandest prize in the WWF. It's not just the setting for the title change that makes it significant, but in winning the WWF title, Ric Flair became the first and only man to hold the NWA, WCW, and WWF heavyweight titles, cementing the idea that anyone could cross companies, keep their gimmick and reputation, and legit challenge for the top strap. To top it all off, a sweaty Nature Boy then cut one hell of a promo flanked by Bobby Heenan and Mr. Perfect. There's a reason why this is still regarded as one of, if not the, greatest Royal Rumbles of all time. Number 5. Mankind vs. The Rock, Raw is War, January 1999. Ugh, that'll put a lot of butts in seats, sarcastically muttered Tony Schiavone on a live WCW Monday Nitro, spoiling the fact that Mankind was to beat The Rock for the WWF title on a pre-recorded Raw is War airing at the same time. Unfortunately for WCW, it really did, as they lost 600,000 viewers on the spot. Yikes. Coinciding with the infamous finger poke of doom from Hollywood Hulk Hogan to Kevin Nash, Mankind lifting the WWF title for the first time was surely the final nail in WCW's coffin, all but ending the Monday Night Wars and making sure that Vince McMahon's show was the only viable one in town. But the victory itself was a massive moment, as the fan favourite Mrs. Foley's baby boy finally won the big one, a million miles away from the ripped giants who previously held the title, such as Hulk Hogan and superstar Billy Graham. Foley was someone who the fans could live through, and this victory was as much for them as it was for the one-eared maniac. Although the reign was short, as were most in the Attitude Era, fans still fondly remember the moment that Mankind did it, hoisted on the shoulder of DX like some mad hairy king. Number 4. Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. The Rock, WrestleMania X7. Once upon a time in the 1990s, there was a little thing called the Attitude Era, where professional wrestling went a bit moody and everyone started swearing and being naughty. It produced arguably the hottest period wrestling will ever see, with millions upon millions tuning in each week to see what ridiculous mayhem was going to unfold. The era was spearheaded by 2 names, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. You might have heard of them. The two had clashed on multiple occasions, with Austin famously beating The Rock for the title at WrestleMania 15. 2 years later, and the stage was set again for the two to face off for the WWF title, this time at WrestleMania X7. The largest WrestleMania in WWF history at that point, X7 served as the crescendo for the Attitude Era, the last hurrah of the biggest boom period wrestling is likely to ever see. The match itself saw both men enter as faces, but seeing as Mania was taking place in the Texas Rattlesnake's backyard, the crowd were more in favor of Stone Cold than the great one. Surprise, surprise, a ref bump occurred, and then the unthinkable happened, with Austin siding with nemesis Vince McMahon and walloping The Rock repeatedly with a steel chair to regain the WWF title in a shady manner. Austin's heel turn did not work well, and audiences gradually drifted away from the product. But hey, what a time to be a fan. Number 3, the Montreal Screwjob. Okay, you know the story by now. Canada, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Sharpshooter, Earl Hebner, WCW, Spit, Vince McMahon punched in the eye. That's pretty much it. But why exactly is the Montreal Screwjob so important? For a start, it ushered in WWF's Attitude Era and helped kickstart the most profitable era in wrestling history. Bret Hart's post-match destruction of the ringside area helped create a feeling of chaos and danger for the Fed, inadvertently helping McMahon as the Hitman made his way out the door. For one of the first times, reality and kayfabe were blurred, and audiences to this day still debate whether the whole thing was real or a work. Bret Hart's career never truly recovered, with WCW failing to properly capitalize on the controversy and stupidly not pushing the Hitman to the top of their card. Shawn Michaels was cemented as a truly detestable heel, with his OTT antics and general prickishness being an extension of his personality at the time. The Screwjob also spawned the villainous Mr. McMahon character, fully transforming Vince McMahon from cringeworthy commentator into gloriously over-the-top villain. It doesn't matter that the mere sight of the McMahons on TV induces groans and fits of vomiting. At the time, it was revolutionary, refreshing, and made a ton of cash. Can you imagine Steve Austin without a Vince to batter? Doesn't bear thinking about. Number 2, Ivan Koloff vs. Bruno Sammartino, January 1971. In the 1960s, there were 3 facts about life. Sky equals blue, grass equals green, and Bruno Sammartino equals WWWF champion. Long before the days of Vince McMahon Jr. and rock and wrestling, the WWWF was all about Bruno. Selling out Madison Square Garden time and time again, the Italian strongman was the undisputed top draw and the face of the company, holding the world title for an astonishing 2,803 days in his inaugural reign. That is over 7 years, or 33.3 times the length of Dean Ambrose's reign. Yeesh. But all good things must come to an end, and in January 1971, the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff put an end to Sammartino's reign in Madison Square Garden, an almost unthinkable outcome. Rather than the deafening boos and potential riot you'd expect, stunned silent greeted the title change, the thousands in attendance refusing to believe that the unbeatable Sammartino had been toppled. Bruno later recounted the event, saying that he thought he'd damaged his ears, and the silence he was hearing was the result of having his proverbial bell rung. Koloff was a transitional champ, dropping the belt 21 days later to Pedro Morales. Bruno eventually ended up winning the title for a second time in December 1973, his second reign only clocking in at 1,237 days. Lazy. Number 1, Hulk Hogan vs. the Iron Sheik, January 1984. The birth of Hulkamania, an event so monumental that chances are without it, this channel wouldn't even exist. It was the mid-80s and Vince McMahon could smell change in the air, knowing that the future wasn't in All-American boy Bob Backlund, but rather the bombastic 150% energy, larger-than-life heel Hulk Hogan. McMahon quickly turned Hogan face and got Backlund to endorse him on TV, but there was still a case of getting the title off of Bob and onto the Hulkster, and a face-versus-face title match was not going to cut it. Plus, there's the alleged sticking point of Backlund refusing to drop the title to somebody who was not an amateur wrestling machine. That should probably be mentioned too. That is where Sheiky Baby stepped in. The Iranian icon was a former Greco-Roman wrestling badass, was also a heel, and was ready to break Backlund's back and make him humble, or something like that. The rest is history. Just 2 weeks after turning face, Hogan was dropping his massive orange leg on the Sheik and beginning his first and longest reign with the belt. This is no mere hyperbole. Hogan beating the Iron Sheik for the WWF title in Madison Square Garden changed everything, leading to a massive boom in professional wrestling, which in turn birthed WrestleMania and so on and so forth. This was the true chaos theory event of professional wrestling, if you want to go all Jurassic Park about it.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.